What do I have to know about your past to understand where you are today?
I was born in Toronto, Canada, to Japanese immigrant parents. I grew up in a suburb called Scarborough. At an early age, I gravitated towards the arts. I'm talking elementary school. I always loved drawing, painting, any activity that allowed me to express my creativity. And then fast forward to, my teenage years in high school, and I still continued to do visual arts. That's what the program was called in high school. And at the same time, nourishing the maths and sciences, um, because that's what I thought I needed to focus on to be successful. Um, and whether or not that was ingrained in me by my parents, I can't pinpoint the exact moment, but they definitely wanted me to do well in math and science. And art was encouraged, but not necessarily considered a meaningful career path. And looking back on it, there was some truth to that because there was just so many unknowns. This was like, believe it or not, pre internet, and there wasn't a lot of information on how you can have a successful career as a creative person at the time. So you can imagine doctor, engineer, lawyer, etc. are top of mind for parents and myself at the time.
Mhm.
So fast forward again, college age, where I was applying for schools, considering college or university. In Canada, there's university and there's college. And when I was in high school at the time, we had to do a 13th grade, or grade 13, as they say it there, to be eligible to go to university. So I did that. At the time of this recording, as far as I know, they've gotten rid of that requirement. So I spent an extra year in high
Mhm.
school to be able to go to university. Um, and universities offered degrees, and colleges, for the most part, did not. So there's no path to
Mhm.
getting an academic degree going to college. I actually decided to go to art school, which did not require my 13th year, which is called OAC, Ontario Academic Credit. So, so yeah, I went to art school. It's called Sheridan College. I went for art fundamentals and animation. I did my 4 years there. Um, and then I held, a diploma in classical animation, which is hand drawn animation. So my background is all in traditional arts, drawing on paper, painting on canvases. And I didn't have a computer or the means to do digital art until well into my career. And so that's
Gotcha.
that's my brief bio.
Yeah, lots of good stuff to unpack there. When
Yeah.
you went to art school in college, at that point, how committed were you into turning this passion of drawing of yours into a career?
I was all in. I don't know if I wanted like a fruitful career out of it. I wasn't thinking that far ahead. Like I didn't have line of sight into that. All I wanted to be was a great artist. As a creative person, I just had this desire just to be really good. And I don't even know what that means. I just wanted to be really good. So like the school had like very stringent entry barrier to entry. So like each person in my class was like the best in their high school at art. So like there was, let's say, 30 people in the class, and each person was just amazing. When you're competing at that level, I call it a competition, even though everyone was very supportive. You know, you really have to step up because everyone was so good. And I would say I was average when I went in. I would say
What school did you
average.
go to?
Sheridan College. It's in a town called Oakville, 20, 30 minutes outside of Toronto. on the complete opposite end of where I grew up. Different
Wow.
demographics, different vibe, different everything. Is like way on the west end. So I was so committed that I lived with my parents in my first year, and I drove every day. And in winter, it took about 2 hours each way because you'd have to imagine that the highways, freeways were just blanketed in snow, and you can't drive so fast. So it was 2 hours each way. And then by the time I got home, and then um, took care of everything that I had to do at home, I would study until 2 or 3 a.m. and then wake up 5 or 6 a.m. I would get 2 to 3 hours of sleep a night and drive back and forth.
Jeez,
And then in my
that's
second
long.
year, I moved to Oakville to be within walking distance of school. Um, and what that allowed me was to get that time back to just draw. Um, but as a lot of people that went to Sheridan can attest to, most of my time was spent in the studio at school. So I rarely spent time in my apartment, honestly. I have very fond memories of my roommates um, in that apartment when we were there, but most of my time was spent at school drawing and notoriously doing all nighters and sleeping at my desk or any flat surface that I could find at school just so I can draw longer.
Wow.
In hindsight, it wasn't healthy at all. But I just felt like I couldn't stop. So I would say I was deeply committed, 100%. So
Wow. Wow. That's what a wild story. And
yeah,
we can, we'll dive right into it in a moment about your jobs and in your future.
yeah,
But you work for some big companies. You've done some cool
yeah,
work in the
yeah,
was that the goal at when you were in college age? Is that what you
yeah,
envisioned for success?
yeah, yeah. So I'll tell you a story about that. I think it was my second year of animation school, which was my third year at the school because my first year was art fundamentals. Uh, I remember I had this desk as an animation desk, right? You have your drawing desk, and behind me was like it was a chalkboard wall.
Mm,
And I remember one day I took a piece of chalk and I wrote down on the blackboard. I think I drew a building and I put DW Dreamworks, and I drew a
mm,
stick man of me on top of the building. And I forget who was with me at the time or who was around. It was probably at 2 a.m. in the morning. And then I said, I'm going to work at DreamWorks. And the reason why I wanted to work at DreamWorks is because they were the new studio in town. This was like Shrek came out, and it was
wow.
just the most amazing movie. And it still holds up. It's very funny.
Hmm.
Um, and I said, I want to work at DreamWorks because when going into school or anyone in animation wants to work at Disney, Disney Pixar now. But at the
Hmm.
time, DreamWorks was the new studio on the block, and they made prior to that they made like Prince of Egypt, um, 2D animation. They made Road to El Dorado, which I loved. But then yeah, Shrek was really when it had its moment. So I said, I'm gonna work at DreamWorks. Um, and I didn't know how I was gonna get there. There's a lot of complications to it because I'm a Canadian citizen. DreamWorks was in Glendale, California, a suburb like in the Los Angeles area. Um, and I didn't, you just don't know about work visas and immigration and what it takes to work in a different country. Um, but yeah, that was me kind of manifesting it before I even knew what that word meant. And I know a lot of people talk about it now. Um, but yeah, that was the vision, and it was kind of a joke at the time.
So how did it eventually work out for you into getting that
So,
DreamWorks job?
yeah, so about so when I graduated college, I was exhausted. I was just exhausted, pulling all nighters for like 4 years of school.
Mm,
My health was at an all time low. and I had this portfolio of work, and um, this was around the time um, when there was uh, kind of a pandemic, kind of like COVID in the early 2000s, called SARS.
Mm,
So the college at the end of each year for graduates had something called Industry Day, where you would, it's kind of like Artist Alley at Comic Con, where you show your work and then studio recruiters would come and walk around and pick talent
mm,
to follow up with. And the dream was to get a job. So the big studios from all over the world would fly in um, and look at these fresh grads um, to hire. But there was the World Health Organization banned travel to Toronto because of SARS. So
mm,
none of the big studios came. So, um, Dreamworks was supposed to come, but they canceled. They pulled out.
oh,
So my dreams kind of got crushed. Not just mine, everyone's kind of did who wanted that. So anyways, packed up my stuff, moved back in with my parents. I slept for probably 2 months. I wasn't sad or anything. I was just tired, and like any new grad, I didn't know what to do, but I wasn't even thinking about that. I was just resting. And then I got a call from one of my classmates about a job at a studio, stop motion studio. Her name's Heather. She's a very talented artist, Heather Soulier. And she's like, "Hey, you want to be a sculptor at this stop motion studio?" So I was like, "Sure." So I came with my portfolio of sculptures that I did in high school. This was before I went to animation school, and they hired me, and then I became a maquette sculptor. And then while I was there, I got a call from someone else from school. His name is Lawrence. He worked at a small boutique animation studio called DKP at the time. Um, it's called Jam Filled Entertainment now. It got sold and changed names a few times. And he was like, "Hey, we need a concept artist. Why don't you come and show your work?" So I went there, and then I got hired as a concept artist. Um, and then around that time when I was there, so they sat me next to a bunch of 3D artists,
mm,
and I had never touched a 3D software package in my life. I was drawing it, literally drawing on paper in the corner.
oh,
And then I befriended everyone around me. Had the time of my life. And then I started to ask for extra work in 3D. So that's when I picked up like texture mapping, um, material hair. It's called surfacing or look development at studios.
mhm,
Um, so then I started to get like more comfortable with the work, and then that's when I, within a year out of school, I started mailing my portfolio to all the studios, honestly, all over the world.
mm,
Most of them were in California, Disney, Dreamworks. Um, God, there's a studio, Rhythm and Hues, Digital Domain, all these VFX shops, ILM, and I got rejected by all of them. I had no in 3D. I had about 6 months of experience, just kind of dabbling.
yeah,
Um, but there was two things that happened. One, I got a call from a hiring manager at a studio called Rhythm and Hues. I believe at the time it was in Venice, California, and they wanted to hire me. Um, and I was so excited. Um, and I was like, "Great, let's do it." And then the follow up call, they found out that I was from Canada, and they were like, "Oh, we're not looking to sponsor and do immigration for anyone. We need someone to start like on Monday." I thought you
yeah,
were in Los Angeles. I was like, "Oh," so bummer. But I
yeah,
realized like maybe I'm onto something. Maybe I'm good enough.
mm,
Um, and then around that time, I met a recruiter from DreamWorks named Kim Mackey. Uh, and she's the best. She said, "You're pretty good. at servicing. That's the department, but um, you don't have any experience. You have no feature experience. Um, like you have a year of experience. You haven't made a movie yet. You're Canadian. We can't even get you a work visa if we wanted to because you don't have a degree. Um, so, uh, that was another piece of the puzzle. I realized that she said you need to have 3 years of work experience that's equivalent with your diploma to a degree.
Hmm.
So keep in touch. Talk to me in 2 years and after you've made a movie. So fast forward 3 years, I worked on a movie called Everyone's Hero for Fox. It was produced out of Toronto. And I had almost 3 years work experience. Um, and there was something called SIGGRAPH. It's like a software computer convention. Um, it was happening in Boston. So myself and three other buddies, we rented a car and we drove to Boston with our portfolios. We all worked together at the same studio. And we just dropped off our portfolios at all these big companies. Kim Mackey was there from Dreamworks. And I was like, hey, Kim. She's like, oh my God, Ricky. She remembered me.
Oh,
This is a testament to how great she is. And dropped off my stuff. She's like, you got new stuff for me? I was like, yep. That's one rule. Never show the same thing twice. Because if they saw your work and you show it again, why would they look at it any differently? They already made a decision. So I came with fresh work, dropped it off, and then that was on a Monday. And then on the Wednesday morning of that week, she called me and said, we want to bring you in for an interview.
oh,
Can you make it at like 10 a.m.? So then I went back to the convention center. They're doing interviews on site. They look at the reels in the hotel at night and they decide who to contact. So I went, I had an interview, and then actually didn't think I did well. It was very short. Uh,
hmm.
and and I met with the supervisor, Sabrina Regal. We still keep in touch. She's great. And yeah, and then that was that. Um, and then I also had an interview with a company called Polygon Pictures based out of Tokyo. Um, and then by the Friday, um, Kim asked me to come back in. They wanted to talk to me and they offered me a job.
Oh,
And she gave me a verbal offer and I verbally accepted it. And I drove back to Toronto with the biggest smile on my face. And sure enough, they got the paperwork going to get me a work visa. I quit my job. And yeah, I would say within a month, I was living in the US, in the LA area in California. So that's how that happened. Basically, there were a bunch of things that I needed to satisfy to even be able to work in the US, because I didn't have a degree and I didn't have any work experience. So that was my path to get to DreamWorks to work on feature animated films. So
wow. Well, common thread that I see in your story is persistence.
yeah,
It took time. You got
it took
that first
time
feature.
and just getting better. Just getting better because they could have hired anyone in the US. There's so many talented people. Why would they spend the extra money, tens of thousands of dollars in lawyer fees and relocation fees to move me from a different country to take a position that could be filled on the Monday by an American person?
Mm,
So you have to be persistent, but you also have to like prove that you're worth it for them to do this. So
hmm. Yeah, I'm trying to think of an actionable step for anybody listening to this. who may be in your shoes when you were in college. And sounds like the success for you to get into that for landing the first DreamWorks job is a combination of a knowing that person that gave you the opportunity and said, "Hey, come back in a few years."
Hmm.
Two, you continuously, persistently sharpening your craft and leveling up
Hmm.
your skill. And three, you coming back and reaching for that opportunity. Do you see anything? I'd love to get your input on that. And has anything changed over the years? And what has anything changed over the years? Are some things different today in that approach? And what has stayed the same?
Yeah. I would say first thing that I've noticed um, is that um, I don't know if there's more. The number of talented people out there has increased. I think it has because software has gotten cheaper, better, faster. And with resources like YouTube tutorials, a lot of this work has been demystified. But when I was working in animation back in the day, like with Maya, it was a very niche skill, and there weren't a lot of resources to learn it. Luckily, I worked with the most amazingly talented Maya users probably in the world. So Maya was created by a company called Alias Wavefront. It was called Alias Maya back in the day, which was founded in Toronto. So a lot of the ex Alias people worked at the same studio as me, um, and there was a lot of resources in person to person relationships. So the software that was birthed in the city that I was born in changed my life, my career path, and by getting that job and sitting next to these people, changed what was possible pre YouTube tutorials. Okay,
Mm,
so now that all of the software like Blender is completely free, there's all this amazing free software that you can learn for free, and there's YouTube tutorials to guide you on that path. Previously, my I think it was like a $4,000 license, so it was almost
gotcha.
impossible to learn it. And back in the day, everyone was learning on like cracked software, um, like Photoshop, Maya, everything was cracked, you know. But now you don't have to necessarily do that. Um, so there's a lot of talented people out there too with applying online and not mailing your portfolio to some random PO box, right?
Hmm.
Applying online, um, a lot of the talent just bubbles up, and there's more people to choose from globally. So the competition is fierce, extremely fierce. And today, with remote work, the competition is even more fierce because previously I had to physically move my life to the US to take this job. But now there's a bunch of studios where you could do high quality work from the comfort of your own home and get paid in local dollars. So while in the past, it felt like you almost had to move to Los Angeles to work with the best of the best, that's not necessarily the case anymore. You can work from anywhere in the world and do really meaningful work. So there's just a lot more competition, a lot more talent that's more visible. Think of platforms like ArtStation. Like you could probably hire any of those people because the work is so high quality.
Hmm.
Back in the day, there was something called, I think, Deviant Art, which is kind of like the ArtStation of today. But the work was like a mixed bag.
Hmm.
So I guess what has changed, the level of competition is higher. Um, Education for this stuff is more accessible and free. So that elevates the competition. You don't need a lot of money to learn this stuff. You don't need, oh, and another thing, technological advances. You don't need these powerhouse computers to learn this stuff anymore. For example, like I do my work on a MacBook Air. Um, it's a low end MacBook Air. Now you could
Wow.
probably use Maya on, I don't know, $500 laptop just to learn. Obviously, the experiences would be better with GPU rendering on like a high powered PC, but
Hmm.
that the necessity of a very expensive PC computer, it's just not there anymore to start learning. So
Mm.
everything is just more accessible now. The competition's higher. You get these people from all over the world that have the same resources that you do to learn anything. And they get to let their talents shine and express themselves creatively, for a lot less dollars than it used to be. So, to summarize, what has changed? Higher competition, um, more work opportunities. What has stayed the same though? Uh, you still have to be, um, you have to fit the talent profile of the job that's required. I was gonna say you have to be the best, but like that's so subjective. But studios hire for a certain look and feel. Like if they want someone that's special, like me, I specialize in like family friendly feature animated style.
Yeah.
So is that better than someone who does AAA gaming, photorealistic stuff? I don't know. It's just different. Right? It's just
Yeah.
different. So like I wouldn't get hired for that. But I would get hired for to make a family friendly animated movie. So it's
Gotcha.
not better, it's different. So, but
So you,
high
yeah.
quality, it's just high quality. You just
Mm.
have to be produce high quality work. That has not changed. That will never change. So, but
Mm.
now there's more people who can produce higher quality. So,
With a larger competition pool, how does one cut through the noise?
oof. I would say consistency, and just being prolific. So, just producing high quality work consistently. An example of that is like you could get, I don't know, you could be a really talented artist and produce one image a year. Or you can be the other artist who either does dailies or weeklies or monthlies of new art drops. So just that the amount of consistent high quality work will kind of cut through the noise. And if you consistently meet people's expectations of quality, then the hiring managers will be like, "Oh, this person is like is really good." Whereas the person who did a one-off can be of equal talent. It's just the body of work will speak for itself. Just like
Mhm.
um, so much work that you can't ignore it, kind of thing. Yeah,
Mm. And Ricky, I know we're almost out of time, but I'd love your unique position is that you're working as an art director at Meta.
correct.
And from my perspective, that companies like that, working as a creative, to me seem like it's such a high and difficult barrier of entry. It's like for all the biggest companies like Nike and Apple, any sort of creative work, to me, it seems super saturated. And that can be discouraging sometimes. Like from your perspective, already working in the company, how do I break through? What approach would you take in my shoes?
That's a good question. Breaking through at like a let's say a big company or a tech company.
Mhm.
So for my specific position as an art director, um, it's it's already assumed that you have a legacy of creating high quality work. the director part of the name is really articulating the decisions that you made that led to the high quality work. So
Mm.
like you could be a very uh, talented artist, heads down, and just produce beautiful work. But if um, a cross-functional partner, we call them, someone on a different team approaches you and says, "Hey, I'd like to discuss the work and the decisions that you made to make it look like that." So if you cannot articulate that, um, then it's very difficult. It's rare to like hire someone just because, for example, they can draw. You
Hmm.
have to be able to like take feedback and understand um, the decisions you're making in an artistic way. And you need to be able to like vocalize it and like write it down. Um, so that is the one of the big differences that I've noticed, let's say working in a purely artistic craft in like movies
Mm.
versus a big company like Meta or other tech companies. Um, Whereas at Dreamworks, uh, someone wouldn't necessarily, like a supervisor, wouldn't necessarily ask me, "Hey, why did you make that decision to do that?" Because when you look at something, you get this reaction where you're like, "Oh, that looks great."
Hmm.
The work speaks for itself. But I find that in tech, and like you called it a big company, but like Dreamworks is a big company too. It's just
Yeah.
different. So I'm just focusing on the tech angle of it. And I can't speak for like Nike because I've never worked there. Um, but like a company at Meta, if you make a beautiful image and just present it to people, that's just the beginning of the conversation. Because Meta is a very data driven company, and they want to move the needle. Whereas if you're making a movie and it's shown in a movie theater, the needle is the box office, box office
Hmm.
receipts. There's no real time data, but like we're able to put something out there to a user and then collect data on whether it resonates or not. Whereas in the movie theater, there's no data collection. So if the product manager says we want to increase the numbers just to be broad by
Yeah.
20%, how can your art move the needle by 20%? What is your theory on on how this image over the other image or asset or whatever it is that you're working on can increase usage? So being able to articulate that um, is the big difference that I've noticed in the two different industries and companies. And I know this is very abstract. It's a very
Yeah.
weird thing as a creative to talk about this,
Yeah.
but as I've matured in my career, um, these are the things that I've noticed. Where yeah, making the art is just almost the first step.
Ricky, my takeaway from this is that to break through into a company like Meta and say for an art director role, it's important that creatives can articulate the creative decisions that they infuse in their art and how they correlate to specific goals. Could you walk me through how I can prove exactly that with my work?
That's a good question. Here's what we do. Before being briefed on a creative task, there's always what we call a job to be done. So without having a clear understanding of what the job to be done is, it's impossible to articulate the decisions that you made. So if you're working on your own project and you want to prove that you could satisfy certain goals and then articulate the decisions that you made um, to achieve those goals, you have to define what the job to be done is or what the goals are. So an example of that is I don't know, let's say you're going to do a piece of concept art. So on your portfolio, on your website, you can do kind of like um, a mock scenario. You can say, my goal of this is to reimagine a Nike shoe. Um, and what I want to achieve with this is I want people to um, fall in love with the Jordan 1 sneaker all over again. Just an example. And then you can write hypothesis. Um, the Jordan 1 sneaker is a beloved design. And by changing the colorway, um, I intend to open up the design to a new audience. Um, how I intend to do that. Uh, First of all, I would do research, find every colorway of every Jordan 1 sneaker that's ever been made. And they've probably done every colorway. So I don't know, find the one that they've never made or one that's really obscure and then change it up a little bit. And that's how I would do that. And then I would come up with that image with a breakdown of everything that I did. So that's exactly how I would do it. I would figure out what my goal is or my objective, articulate what I think I know about the product um, or the goal and how I can solve it is, and then show it, and then summarize it. So if you go into an interview to be a sneaker designer at Nike, dream job, right?
Mm-hmm.
And your website has case studies of this breakdown, and you
Mm-hmm.
take some of their legacy shoes and redesign them and show them something fresh, then I guarantee you will at least impress them in a certain way. Can't guarantee that you'll get the job, but like you'll cut through the noise, just because you've documented what you're trying to solve. And you could even come up with other imaginary scenarios. Like my goal is to design a sneaker that is uh, as breathable as a mesh shoe on top. Let's say they're Vapor Max, but I want it to be waterproof. So you could just add certain variables in there and then satisfy those in your design, and just come up with all these scenarios. Or I'm trying to come up with a shoe that will commemorate, I don't know, the men's US or women's soccer team.
Mm-hmm.
And then look up all the branding on those and the colors that they use and the shoes that they wear, and then come up with a new one. So your job to be done is to satisfy the branding, and pay homage to a certain sport and team of a certain country. Then just do it. So you get to be creative, but you also show that you can satisfy professional and business requirements. So that is my advice on how to cut through and prove that you can do it, is to just show them that you can do it. The key piece here is you don't have to ask for permission, or to get a prompt from these companies because you don't work there yet. You have to imagine these scenarios in your head and then
Mm-hmm.
satisfy them.
And in your creative journey, what are some ways that one could shoot themselves in the foot when trying to do this?
Not doing a good job at a high level. Like you can say,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh, I'm reimagining this shoe," and then, to be honest, it just doesn't look very good or
Mm-hmm.
feel good, or it doesn't function properly. Um, if the work falls flat, then you kind of like, in this relay to get that job, you've dropped the baton. You were about to cross the finish line, and then you just ran out of steam, and you didn't have what it takes. And that's okay. And that's where the consistency and hard work pays off to
Mm.
get better. You have to be really aware of your strengths and weaknesses, your limitations, and you got to work on those to improve, to be at a world class level, to work at these big companies.
And finally, do you have any last words to leave aspiring art directors who may want to work in a company like Instagram or in social media? Any last words?
Oof. Um, One thing that I truly believe helped me get that job at Instagram as an art director was that I was consistently using their tools before I even worked there. And in particular, that tool is called Spark. It's their augmented reality platform that they
Mm.
opened up to the public. It's free. I downloaded it, and probably every day for a year, I played with it. I studied it. I used all the resources to learn their tool. So when it was time to show them my portfolio, it was using their tool. So they're, you know, the hiring manager and the team, the panel of judges looking at your work don't have to connect any dots. Like you created the dot that they
Yeah.
use. You
Hmm.
you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
like there's no that's a very specific scenario, but like
Hmm.
I think it's true for a lot of things.
And
Like
was
if you
that your
want to work,
strategy?
yeah, that was my strategy, was to show that I can already do the work. So it's kind of a no brainer to hire me. But the work has to be high quality too, again,
Hmm.
because you could use Spark and fumble for a year and the quality's not there, then the conversation ends right there. But if you want to work at an animation studio and they use Maya 3D software, then show them a portfolio of you using Maya software.
Hmm.
So when they hire you, you can hit the ground running. You'd have to get trained up on their proprietary tools, but you've already proven that you can do the work immediately at a high level. So that's my advice: is to just research the companies, know what tools they use, get as closely to that as possible, show them that you could do high quality work with the tools that they use if possible. Um, and right there, you've already checked a lot of the boxes. So you have the high quality work, proficiency in their software. A lot of job postings will say will have software requirements or like
Hmm.
nice to haves.
Hmm.
So really pay attention to those and get proficient with those. And then you'll really cut through a lot of the noise, because a lot of portfolios and resumes that they get um, won't read the fine print.
You stress the importance of having really good work. Is that just a combination of practice, consistency, learning, and experimenting over long periods of time? Or is there anything else that I'm missing?
Um, yeah, that's very true. I think the one thing um, that you're missing there is, you said good work, understanding what bad work is,
Mm.
because in my opinion, good work is the result of not doing bad work. But everyone does bad work. You have to get it out of your system
Mm.
to get to the good work. You don't wake up one day and say, I'm gonna be a great artist, and then you produce great art right away. Maybe you will, maybe you're some sort of like freak,
Yeah.
but the good work is a result of doing a lot of bad work. So doing work, standing back, looking at it objectively, and understanding what is bad about it, then just don't do that
Mm.
again. And
Mm.
then eventually you whittle away, and there's this beautiful polished piece of work that's a result of chipping away all the bad stuff.
Mm.
So like consistency is one thing, but you can be consistent for 5 years and never be good at
I'm
something.
scared of that. I'm afraid of that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So like if you're not learning and being self-aware,
Mm.
um, then you're spinning your wheels and you're wasting your time.
Mm. You know how sometimes when you create something, you just kind of have this gut feeling that something's not quite right?
Yeah,
To me, the takeaway is okay, investigate that. If something's not
yeah,
right, really
yeah,
investigate it until you articulated it.
exactly.
Would you add anything to that on how to identify what's bad work?
Yeah, that self-awareness is good, but also ask someone that
Yeah,
that that has a good eye that you respect.
yeah.
What do you think of this work? And then be ready for that feedback. Um, and you could say, and be specific.
Mm,
Because sometimes people, when they hit me up and they say, hey, do you mind critiquing my work, or what do you think about this, it's like, on what vector am I supposed to judge this by?
mm,
Like what are the requirements? Like it looks good, but like, do you want me to talk about the lighting, the shading, the model, the movement? Like what are we trying to achieve here? And then I can give you the best feedback.
mm,
um because asking me what I think about something is like, it's really like, it's a very broad question. um because I could really drill down on specific things.